Welcome back to another video. Today we're at Right Away Lending with Paulina Flores, and we're going to sit down. We're going to have a very brief conversation about interest rates, how to make them a little bit more exciting maybe, and some other common questions. But with that, let's just jump right into it and just give us just a very brief background on the company you work for, just a little bit of how you can help clients.
Yeah, so I am a mortgage broker. What that means is I essentially have multiple lenders that can help you with financing. So I'm not the traditional one box fits all. We have a little bit of everything. Down payment assistance, ITIN loans, bank statement only loans.
What?
Yes.
ITIN? Yeah, so I'm going to be the devil's advocate.
ITIN.
If there's any time there's an acronym or something, maybe someone doesn't know what that is.
So that's true. So ITIN is for individuals who are not legally, they don't have like a social security here, but they have permission to work here. Yep. Okay, and they've come from a different country. So they called, instead of saying social security, they say ITIN.
Just want to make sure everyone has. No, but sometimes the jargon is, or this language or acronyms, it's acronyms or alphabet soup. So I just want to make sure we're not down that path.
Yes. So, and I could talk a little bit more about that in the when I talk about the down payment. But we do the ITIN, the bank statements, and then your regular FHA, which is a first-time home buyers homes. You know, the VA for the veterans, and any of those USDA loans for the rural areas where population is very minimal. We also have the construction loans if people are going to build. So a little bit of everything. So essentially, if people don't qualify with their traditional lender, they normally come to us because we have our programs are a little more diverse.
So is there any certain credit score? Because that's always a big one. So people need to worry about or think about.
So it depends. We have lenders that take credit scores up to 500. We have lenders that take credit scores at 600, and we have some lenders that take credit scores at 640. Now, we can get you the loan. It's just the interest rate that's going to vary. Obviously, if you're at a 740, you're going to get a better rate than if you're at a 500. So. Well,
actually, let's dive into that just slightly. So the typical buyer out there is, how can I afford, I can't get approved for this loan because my credit score is low or I have too much debt, or what are some of the things that they should be thinking about?
Definitely giving us a call, having a consultation with me. I have a couple tricks up my sleeve that I can get boosts pretty fast on credit scores, because you'd be surprised, like the minimal things, like for example, adding your utilities to the credit reporting. So you would call like your electric company and you would say, can you please report my payment history to the credit bureaus? That's positive history because you're balancing positive with negative history, and you want more positive than negative, and that's how you get a boost.
Right.
So that's one thing we do. So we have like several options to help people. The credit really is not really an issue. Credit is fixable so fast. It's the down payment.
Well, and I think a lot of people get scared, so they just kind of stop in their tracks. So then they don't do anything.
Because they're embarrassed. Nobody wants to talk about, they were late on their payments, they got repoed, whatever.
It's not the sexy talk,
really. It's not the sexy talk. It's like pulling strings out of people. But we do have, like, if I can't help you with 3 quick fixes that we have, then we'll send you to our partner credit restorations, and they're very affordable, and they boost our people in like 60, 90 days. So credit is really not an issue for us.
Well, and then a lot of it is just like anything. If you're a little proactive and you do some planning and maybe a couple steps that aren't really the most fun usually, but you'll see a lot of benefit if you take a couple steps.
Yeah, the hardest step is talking about it, I think. Just asking for that help. But once we're there, it's good.
Well, and do you get this a lot from clients that they'll come to you like, I didn't realize it was going to be this easy.
All the time.
If I would have known this a year ago,
I would have bought last year. Yeah, I get that a lot.
And then they're like, well, you really lost out because the market changed a lot. So, well, how do you feel, or what's your latest discussion or thoughts on interest rates? Because that's kind of the buzz right now.
I think
continues to be.
I think we gotta just remove the focus on the interest rate. We hear it a lot in the industry, like date the interest rate, marry the house, because people are so focused on the interest rate. And honestly, you can refinance at little to no cost.
Right.
The interest rate is not the issue. The issue is work history. You have to be in your job. You have to have work history for 2 years, right? That we cannot change. Like I talked to a client yesterday. She only had 4 months of work history ever in her life.
But what about the clients that are a little bit more on the entrepreneur side?
I love those. So
because it's a little bit harder to show consistent income.
No problem with us because we just do the bank statement only loans. So we take either 12 months of bank statements or 24 months of bank statements depending on their credit score, and we do like this fancy calculation of an income. So we don't have to worry about their deductions. Like if they're heavy deductors, we can do bank statement only loans for them.
Well, that's awesome. Well, so we talked a little bit about,
Yeah.
you mentioned down payment, but
Yes.
let's touch on that briefly. You have to have 20% down, right? Every 20% down. It used to be the old days, but so I think there's a
depends.
lot of people that probably still think that's their only option. They're trying to squirrel away a few dollars every
Yes.
month and
It's-
never really getting ahead to get to that
Yes,
point.
correct. It's 20% down if you're buying an investment property. Now, if you're buying,
But if you're not getting a home yet, you're probably not buying an investment
correct,
properties.
correct. But if you're a first-time home buyer, you've never bought a house, it's either 3% on a conventional loan. That means that you have a higher credit score if you're doing a 3%, or a 3.5% if you're doing the FHA lending, which if you have your credit score like 580, 600, we can do 3.5%. Now, if you have a home, but you want to buy another primary residence where you're moving to another house because you want to, more rooms, you need more space, then at that point, you would give 5% down on a conventional. So there's different options.
So then if you don't even have the 3%, the options are...
Yes, so there's different options. There's 3%, there's 3.5%, there's 5%, there's 10%.
No, so, no
there's
of that,
20.
say it's 3%.
Okay,
And client A doesn't have the 3%.
okay.
What are their options?
So we have two options. We have down payment assistance grants, where it's almost like applying to college when you're applying for a scholarship. So you go through an application process where they fill out an application, they turn in their income docs, they have to meet with the counselor. The counselor goes over financial literacy with them.
College. a little
Yes, it is exactly like applying for college and getting a scholarship. So the
bit.
grant.
Without the fun of the going to the games
Yes,
and the
correct. So it is very
social activities.
it is very intensive. You have to be very proactive. It's not for the people who don't want to do paperwork, for sure. There is an income limit on that by household. You have an income limit. Some of those grants have stipulations that you have to live in a home for a certain amount of years. You can't do this, you can't do that. Some of them have stipulations in the area you buy. That's the grant side. Now we have down payment assistance, that's the repayable loan, where they give you a loan for the down payment. Now these are nice because it's a 10-year loan, and it's instead of bringing $15,000 to the table, you're just going to get a payment of $140 a month, which for some people, $140 a month is a lot more accessible than saving $15,000.
Right, so then they're paying that off versus
Correct.
squirreling away that $50 a
Yes.
month or whatever it
Yes.
is, and then it's 5 years later, and the market keeps
Yeah.
changing as well. It keeps going up, and they never get ahead. So.
Correct. And with that program, they can refinance after a year. There's no income limit, so you can make $50K or you can make $100K. It doesn't matter. You could still, it's a repayable loan, so it doesn't, as long as your credit score is above like the 600 margin, you're at the 600 and above, you're good in that aspect.
That's some great options.
But it has to be your primary residence. So you don't have to be a first-time home buyer, but it has to be your primary residence that you're moving into.
And then the other option is calling up Uncle Joe down the
Yes,
street, right?
or
And-
grandma. I get a lot of grandmas. They will gift money. I just had a grandma who gifted 10 grand. She's like, I'm going to gift my grandson $10,000. I'm getting ready to pass, and I'm splitting my assets or whatnot. And they write a gift letter, and they just wire that money to the title company at the closing table.
That's the brilliant option. So call up a grandma down the street, and maybe someone else's grandma if it's not yours.
Yes, really.
That's always an option. But
Yes.
what I want to make sure is clear for a lot of people out there is that they think they have no options.
Yeah, and there's so many options. Too many. I mean, everybody has a different story, but there's so many options.
And it's a lot of game of math. I always think of too, because you have, if you're not in the market, you're chasing it, and it's growing, it's staying ahead of you. So if you can jump in there, and then you could maybe pay off that first loan or something too, the free money.
Yes.
Then you can get ahead.
And it's an
Make
asset.
equity.
It's definitely an equity game. We have so many clients that buy one house after the next, and they're building this passive income at a very young age because they don't care about the rate.
Right.
They're not focused on the interest rate. I mean, they care, but they're not focused on it right now. So they're building wealth while using these assistants.
Well, right, but even as the buyers again out there, is that if you're waiting because the market and you think the interest rates, because there's so much talk about that, you're waiting for that, you're losing out on all the other advantages right now because the leverage you have, as the rates come down again, assuming they do a little bit,
especially with seller
the
concessions.
competition's going to go up a lot.
Right now we have a lot of seller concessions, which means that the seller is willing to pay your financing cost for the loan. Your title fees,
That's a good
your
point.
escrow is property tax and insurance.
Because closing costs is always a big one too, because especially if you're newer to the process, down payment is maybe foreign. Closing costs, I don't know what that is. What does that
and
entail?
people think it's just the down payment. It's not. It's the
Yeah.
down payment. It's title fees. It's the escrow rebuild. It's the closing costs. It's appraisal. It's inspection. There's so much involved that goes into buying a house. But if you have the seller concessions, it helps you with that piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so right now I
That's
think it's a
awesome.
great time to buy because your rate might be, a little bit higher, but you're having the buyer pay for your costs. So instead of coming in with 30 grand, you're coming in with like 15.
Well, I always look at it like, well, you can refinance the rate down, but if you pay $500,000 house or something, and you're in the house, you can't go back to the bank and say, well, the market's shifted now. Can you move that down to 450 or something, right?
Yeah.
You can't
You can't.
refinance a cost,
You can't.
the dollar value.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you can lock in there and remove the competition a little bit, and get your loan.
Yes, and that's another thing. There's not really a lot of competition. In 2020, we were seeing people, there was like 30 offers, 35 offers on one house. People were like saying 75K over asking. And now you go see these homes and they don't even have offers. So you're the first offer accepted.
I'm sure you've seen some memes on Instagram or something, or I've even done something like this on my account, is the two examples, a year ago and today, and how it was, say, 450 was the example, and then it went for 5. And then now it's, and the rate was lower, but now it's 450 and maybe it went for 440 or went a little under. And then over time, it's like the payment's almost equal, but then you're in the house.
I've seen some stuff that's like really good for buyers. Like I just had a buyer who got into contract. The house was being for sale for $390, and she put an offer in for $375 with 3% seller concessions, and they took it.
That's awesome.
So that's like under asking plus paying all your fees. Like that's amazing.
Well, but then look at how much she's like saving by that versus if it was a year ago.
Correct.
By not being afraid of the interest rate.
Exactly. And then at that point, the interest rate is just, it's not something we're focusing on. We're focusing on seller concessions. We're focusing on down payment assistance because in 2020, they had stopped the funding. They weren't giving the funding. So right now we have seller concessions, we have down payment assistance, we have all this assistance to buy a house. So I honestly think it's easier to buy now than it was
right
then.
Because, well, the thing is, if the competition isn't there, you might actually, because I know a lot of people that were trying to buy last year before, and they gave up because they were losing every single house,
and they were getting outbidded by cash investors who were just dropping $300K.
Like, oh, how much?
Well, guess what, all those
so
investors
like if you're one
are
of those
selling
guys
now.
out there right now, either the investor or you probably ran into one of them, so it's like interesting.
And now those investors are trying to sell. I have a lot of those investors trying to get rid of those properties now.
But that whole interest rate conversation, people sometimes do get lost in just like what you hear in the media, or it's like if I said I'll give you $100 for free, and you just needed to, like, I don't know, move over to this sit over here. Sometimes I don't know, that's free.
What's funny
it's
is
just too easy, or it doesn't make sense.
They're so focused on the interest rate for the house, but they don't. I ask my clients, like when they ask me about the interest rate, I'm like, what's the interest rate on your credit card? And they don't know, and I'm like, you don't know what the interest rate is? I'm like, let's pull that up on your phone. They turn on, I'm like, that's 24%. I mean, if we're talking about fives, we're in the fives right now, right? Well, I am at least. I don't know other lenders. I'm in the fives for somebody with a decent amount of credit. So if we're talking about 5%, comparing it to 24% on your Discover card, that's huge compared to 100% interest on your rent, because that's not yours.
What if you had a $300,000 house at like 10% interest, or a $500,000 house on like, just a couple of points less than that? I mean, doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't.
If it was the same exact house and everything, but we could really go into that for a
I know, we really could. So I think it's like a lot of people are so focused on the house rate, interest rates, because everybody talks about that. But we're not. You ask them what their interest rate is on their car, they have no idea. Interest rate on their credit cards, they have no idea. Interest rate on their student loans, no idea.
Yeah.
All those loans and financing are still higher than a home.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess just to kind of summarize, don't be afraid of the interest rates. There are options for down payment. Anything else we touched on? That was kind of the highlights.
I think it's like don't sit there and wonder and believe everything you see on social media or the news or whatever. Ask, because everybody's situation is
that's
different.
probably the third piece, is just don't be afraid to make the first move, reach out, make a phone call. You know, we're here waiting for you,
Yes.
just waiting impatiently, like we're waiting in high school for that girl to call us. Like, when is she gonna call?
Yeah.
I never had that problem.
I was a dork in high
No,
school.
I was right in the
never
middle,
called
yeah.
anybody.
It's another video. We'll talk about that next time. But,
Yes.
with that, we'll go ahead and end there. And if you want to reach out to Paulina or myself,
Yes.
I'll have everything on the bottom of this video. And make sure to follow us on Instagram as well, because we always do all kinds
Yes.
of fun stuff there. We're not
We do.
completely shy about sharing information and having fun
Yeah.
along the way.
That's right.